Okay, this is part 3 of the first chapter from How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius, a book by me, Pete Rogers, paperback. Basically what we're talking about is how do you raise your performance in sports or in academics, especially in academics, to a higher level. Again, this is not about, getting a B plus or an A minus in junior college or something. This is about being A plus, first in your class in medical school, this level of intensity. And we're going to go how you subtle nuanced things that just puts you to a higher level academically, okay? You train your brain. You develop metacognition, awareness of what you're doing, so you can make everything as efficient as possible, okay? Like I said, the average student, they sort of memorize what they have to, take the test, and they hope they do well. Whereas the really best students, they're constantly trying to really learn the material, to absorb it. They view it as part of their potential career. When I was studying biology, yeah, sure, I wanted to become a doctor, but I had also this idea I'd be a great scientist. And not just a doctor, but a great doctor. So I really wanted to learn everything. I didn't see myself as running a sprint to do well on the midterm or the final. I saw myself as, running this marathon to become an all-time great doctor, and that's what I did. Another thing about a real good student is, when I was at Stanford, the students that were just struggling with the class, they would try to memorize everything, highlight up their notes, and hope they do well on a test, stay up late studying. Versus the kids that were the A-plus students, we would have conversations about the topics. For example, when I was in biology, I had a friend named Jay, and we both thought we were going to be wildlife biologists at that time. And he had an older friend. We'd go bird watching, and his older friend was a professor of natural history and biology, and he'd be explaining to us all these interesting things about it. And just like for perspective on personality, when I was a sophomore in college, biology major, evolutionary biology was my specific major, we had gone bird watching out at the Palo Alto Baylands by Stanford. And I went there by myself. I'm curious. I had some ideas about bird watching that I wanted to see if I could confirm. And I go up to the Nature Center desk and I say, "Can I please have your field guide?" And they say, "Oh, we don't have a field guide." I go, "What do you mean you don't have a field guide?" I couldn't believe that, because there's all kinds of different field guides about the birds and the local flora and fauna and whatnot. So I thought that was such a terrible thing that they didn't have a field guide at the Palo Alto Baylands that I meant, and I wrote my own. I studied all the birds in that area, I mapped them out, and I wrote my own field guide for them. I was super busy being a varsity athlete, starter on the varsity wrestling team, and taking the most difficult pre-med classes. But the reason I'm telling you that story is that's the type of personality. I got A+ in biology that semester, by the way, is that intense feeling that this isn't just a class, this is my life, this is like super important. That gets you good at a subject, okay? And then these conversations about it, it's a much higher level than just trying to memorize stuff. You're thinking about the material. You're having conversations about it. Okay, here's a quote by educator Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi. He says, "Thinking leads a man to knowledge. He may see and hear and read and learn as much as he pleases, but he will not know any of it, except that which he has thought over, that which by thinking he has made the property of his own mind. Man by thinking only becomes truly man. Take away thought from man's life and what remains." So again, the point is when you have a conversation, you have to be able to articulate the material. And the most effective study skill is what I call a walk and talk. So you study the material, and after you study the material, you're reading your book, you close your book, you put your book down, and then you just walk around. I would walk around my house, my apartment, and I would just start talking about the subject that I had just read about. And then you can see, was I able to speak back everything that just came out of that chapter? And if you forget something, then you go look it back up in the book again. And it's just like Winston Churchill had said, nothing is so firmly fixed in our mind as that which we have blundered. So that you will then remember it because you went and looked it up. So that's called the self-test or a walk and talk self-test. It's very powerful. And like, let's say if I had to drive the car, instead of listening to the radio like an idiot, I would just talk to myself. And I start going through the subject. Let's say you're doing glycolysis, a biochemistry. I say, okay, glucose is pumped into the cell, comes into the cell, then it's phosphorylated, puts a big charge on it so it can't exit out. Then it has to be isomerized into fructose, so it's a symmetric molecule to then undergo the 3-carbon phase when it's split in half. And by talking about it all, you then have a very clear picture of it in your mind. And anytime you miss something, you go look it back up and then you try to talk about it again. And eventually you can talk about the whole thing from start to finish, especially when you've made then a mnemonic which captures the irreducible minimum of the biochemical cycle, for example. Okay. Oh, another example is when I work as a neuroradiologist, for example. Somebody will come up to me and they'll ask me a question, can you go over this brain MRI with us? We have a question about it. Now, could you imagine if I said to them, well, could you please put that question into a multiple choice format for me? No, that's ridiculous. I have to look at the films, articulate the findings, then explain the differential diagnosis for the findings. And that's what I'm saying is that's real knowledge when you know how to have a conversation about it. And the other key thing of good knowledge, real knowledge, useful knowledge is usually causation. You know what causes what. I know that this causes this disease and this is the consequence and this is the treatment. I understand the whole big picture on it. What a lot of students do is they sort of binge and purge. Quick, memorize something, take a test, forget it. And you want to be more than that. You want to be constantly learning and building up your knowledge so that you'll keep on accumulating knowledge, and the more time goes by, the bigger advantage you have on the other students. Okay, so it's not just like a race to get a grade on that class. It's more like just to build up your lifelong learning. And when you're really learning something, that's why you have to want it. Because if you're learning something that just feels like a punishment, a hassle, I got to get a grade in this class so I can get out my career, then you're not as motivated to study. Versus when you see it as part of where you're going with your career, then it's more valuable to you. Like look about wrestling technique, okay? When you're on a wrestling team, you want to learn the technique, because if you don't have good technique, you will lose. You will get beat up, and it's painful to get beat up, okay? And it's also embarrassing and humiliating. So you want to learn that technique. So when you work on, let's say, a front body lock to stop somebody, on a leg attack, you're going to want to remember, how do you get in position front body lock? How do you get in position for a front headlock, okay? So what I'm trying to say is, you don't forget that after the test. You remember that the rest of your life, okay? I still could wrestle with, my nephew was senior in high school as a wrestler. I was coaching him. So something that's useful, how to drive a car, how to talk to women, you remember it the rest of your life, okay? Because it's valuable information. And the more you care about your subject, the more valuable the different parts will be, and the more they will stick in your brain, okay? All right, the schools only give you sort of an average standard way of doing things. Here's a quote by Alexander Dumas. He says, "School does not make one wise. Knowledge requires only memorization, but wisdom requires understanding, and understanding requires philosophy." And that's why you should be having conversations about the material. Try to have at least one intelligent friend you can talk with, or have an online friend. Figure out what you got to do. But have those conversations. That's another reason why watching, now that they're available, YouTube videos, for example, on biochemistry or whatever subject it is that you're studying. Okay, I'm now going to share with you a nice quote by Ayn Rand. Okay, she's the smartest lady who ever lived, this Ayn Rand lady. "In order to live, a man must act. And in order to act, he must make choices. In order to make choices, he must define a code of values. In order to define a code of values, he must know what he is. I know that I wanted to be a great student, a great scientist, or a great biologist, or a great doctor. So you have to know that, because that makes the material valuable to you. He must know what he is, and he must know where he is in an academic classroom major, and he must know his own nature, a person who desires to learn, and the nature of the universe. It's rational, and it is possible to learn. Other people have done it. I can do it too. Why not me?" Okay? Ayn Rand continues. "He needs philosophy. He cannot escape this need. His only alternative is whether the philosophy guiding him is to be chosen by his mind or by chance." And so that's what I'm saying is, you want to consciously choose what you want to do. I want to become great at biology, science, and medicine, so I must learn this. This is part of the jargon of my field, the vocabulary of my field. I must understand it. And when you tell that to your brain goes, okay, then we have to pay attention to this. We need to really learn it. Okay, so that's it for this part 3 video today on how to raise IQ and become a genius.